All right. Welcome, everyone. All right, Trevor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the KP Illumination Series. I'm Trevor Murray, Senior Nurse Director with the Northern California Scholars Academy here at Kaiser Permanente, and I'm honored to be your host again today. Our session, Nursing Unstoppable, Reclaiming Our Voice, Our Value, Our Profession, is sure to be an exceptional program, and I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. But first, before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to note. Number one is this session is being recorded. The edited version will be sent to all registrants as soon as it's available. Number two, the session will run for 1 hour with 15 minutes reserved for Q&A at the end. Please hold your questions until the end, but feel free to enter them into the chat at any time. They'll be gathered and shared with the speaker during the Q&A portion. California nurses are eligible for one contact hour and will receive confirmation at the end of the month. We're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for your leadership, your heart, and courage bringing this work forward. Today's session centers on you, the nurse who makes care possible. You who carry the weight of our systems, families, and outcomes. You who are essential to healthcare, yet too often unheard in its design. Our speaker has spent her career helping organizations address these realities by creating systems that protect, retain, and elevate the nursing workforce. She has worked across settings to turn stress into strategy, crisis into competence, and burnout into bold leadership. As a certified speaking professional, fellow of the American Academy of Nursing, and TEDx speaker, she brings a global perspective to the challenges you face every day. Please welcome the professional guiding this next chapter of nursing, not by adding more to your workload, but by restoring what belongs to you: voice, value, and influence. Please join me in welcoming Sherm Ann Weinstein.
Thank you for that, Trevor. I truly appreciate that warm welcome. It was just wonderful. And I too would like to share my thoughts in terms of how grateful I am that each of you has joined us today. We're thrilled to have you here, and I believe that you're in for a treat that will really restore your passion and allow you to understand fully the commitment that you've made to this profession and why it is so profound and so important to keep it enduring. So thanks for being here. I'm not just your guest, I'm your peer. My goal isn't just to talk to you, but it's to make you feel that when you leave this session, you feel empowered, inspired, and more passionate about your nursing career than ever before. So before we dig in with the just one word, I want you to take that deep breath. Acknowledge yourself for showing up. You are here because you care. And you are here because you know and we know that your work matters. So with that in mind, we're going to check in with ourselves for a moment and take a quick pulse of the room. The slide says, how are you feeling today as a nurse? So I ask you, how are you feeling? Put the word in the chat that best captures how you feel. Is it exhausted? Are you running on empty? Is it undervalued? Are you giving your all and feeling unseen? Is it broken? Are you worn down by the system? Is it resilient? Are you bouncing back despite it all? Are you committed, still here, still caring? Or are you adaptable, finding new ways to thrive? I see so many additional words, but take a moment. Again, if you feel comfortable, type your word in the chat or raise your hand and pick the word that hits closest to home, to your heart. And let's feel the collective mood in the room. This is the start of our conversation together. So type it in or raise your hand. And I see burdened, hopeful, committed, undistracted. That's an interesting one. Frustrated, fulfilled, undervalued, adaptable and feeling overwhelmed but trying to get beyond it to be adaptable, ambivalent, grateful, tired, energized, overwhelmed yet persistent. We have a lot of people who are overwhelmed by overload, misled. That's interesting. Content, exhausted but grateful, wistful, guarded, stressed but positive. And the words continue to flow, sometimes misunderstood. There are mixed feelings in terms of who we are and where we are today. But I hear you. Your hosts hear you. So let's make sure that our time together is focused and actionable. Here's my promise to you today. I'm not just sharing ideas. I'm giving you tools to analyze changes, to create communication strategies, and to apply design thinking to change your reality. Together, we're moving beyond conversation. We're moving into action. So these are your learning objectives. Let's think together about what truly drives change beyond just getting through a shift. It's time to ignite the moment. So we begin with a distinction that transforms our approach. How does nursing feel right now? What do you need most right now? And let's frame motivation and movement. What is motivation? Motivation is a bandage. It's a Band-Aid effect, nothing more. It helps you get through a tough shift, but a movement is a cure. A movement is like a surgical approach that nips that disease in the bud and eliminates the metastasis and allows you to grow. We can't just patch the cures anymore. We need to change the pulse. So I ask you, when have you felt motivated, but truly wished, there was a bigger system change that could actually solve your problem? When did you last feel that way? Or do you feel that way right now? When did you feel that way? When have you felt motivated but wished there was something bigger to solve the problem? Feel free to respond in the chat. It might have been your last shift. Megan says last year sometime, I think. But Adrienne says daily. And Mo Cheng says every single day. There's a huge difference between motivation and a movement. We want to be part of the movement. I see most days, I see somewhat daily to weekly. Again, I see every day. So then let's look at the pressures that nurses face today that demand so much more than a quick fix. What about today's nurses? What about you? Nursing today. Today's nurses operate under unprecedented pressure, high patient acuity, staffing shortages, endless documentation, even with the support of AI. And the result? Burnout, moral injury, retention crises. Let me ask you, how many of you have felt forced to provide care that didn't measure up to your standards because of systemic pressures? How many of you have felt that way? That the care that perhaps you provided did not measure up to what you would expect for yourself simply because of the system in which you work? And then I see, oh, definitely, and lots of thumbs up, because we've all, each of us, has at one time or another felt that way. So the pressures that nurses face today demand so much more than a quick fix, don't they? Nursing today, let's look at this, okay? Nursing today operates under unprecedented pressure. Again, such acuity, such burnout, such moral distress, such retention crises. We don't want to get stuck in the problem. There is a way forward. So we're going to pause for a moment and invite a few shares. We're here today to face it honestly, because let's face it, if we stay in the problem, we stay victims. But you're the experts. You're qualified, highly qualified, so qualified to design the solutions. It's time for us to shift from victim to expert. One of the most powerful ways to do so is to claim your voice. So here are the questions in the poll. Have you felt moral distress in your professional practice? Choose. All the time, sometimes, rarely, never.
So Sharon, we have, right now we have 46 responses, and it appears that 74% of folks are saying sometimes, and we're up to 56, 75% still sometimes, and 14% say yes all the time, and 10
That's
rarely.
frightening. And I'd like to know who the 10 who say rarely are.
Now it's
Wow.
15.
Okay, now it's
15% of 65 responses and 68 responses.
Wow. So have you felt moral distress in your professional practice? The answers are frightening.
And Mo Chung says, we need another option that says a lot of the time.
Thank you, Mo Chung. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're leveling out at 78 responses, with 14% saying yes all the time, 72% saying sometimes, and 14% saying rarely.
Okay. Shall we move to the next question? Which of these feels threatened to you? Your voice, your ability to speak up and speak out, your value, being recognized for who you are and what you do, or your purpose, meaning in your work? Which of these feels threatened to you?
Okay, results are coming in. Right now, 22 responses, 50% being recognized, value, and 41 responses now. Looks like it's hovering at 47% value, 36% voice, and 18% purpose. Still have some responses coming in, and it still looks like value is still the number one at this moment at 44%. As the responses are still coming in. Second is voice of speaking up, and then final is purpose. With 77 responses, it looks like the 43% of folks feel value or being recognized, 39% say voice or speaking up, and 18% say purpose, meaning in your work.
Okay. I have a question I'd like to ask based on what you've shared so far. If value is such a key issue, and you feel as if you're not recognized for the value that you bring to the workplace and to healthcare and to outcomes, why do you think that matters? Why is it important to you? And why do you think that's the case? Is it your system? Is it the system in which you work? Is it your manager? Is it your director? Is it your schedule? Is it your staffing? Is it acuity? What is it that makes you feel as if you are not valued? We all know the importance of meaningful recognition in nursing. We know how that makes us feel. Unfortunately, I think for most of us, that meaningful recognition only comes at set times. It comes perhaps during an evaluation or during a periodic response to something. Perhaps it's a DAISY event or something else. Perhaps it's magnet recognition. But it's not ongoing recognition. It's not something that every day and in every way, when we come to work, we feel whole. We feel valued. So what is it? I see that there's a comment that says if you work at the bedside, it's frequent. But why? Why do we feel undervalued? When you leave work and when you return to your home or to your family or to your loved ones or to your roommate or to your partner, you feel valued, you feel appreciated. Why do we not feel that at work? At the place where we spend the bulk of our time. So Mo Chung says no time allowed for professional enrichment. Lori says that the healthcare system factors are beyond our organization, making nurses feel less valued as a whole. And yet Jenna, I think it's Jenna, says that she feels valued within the system and leadership, but nationally there has been a disregard for nursing as a profession. I agree. And she feels that the government has not recognized the importance of nursing for our nation and for the health of our population. That is so true. When nursing is declassified and is not a profession, what is it? When each of us who has gone through a curriculum and made a transition from education into practice and taken care of others and saved lives and created change and forced impact, why are we not a profession? Is that cause for an entirely new Congress? And Jessica says, because no matter what we do, what we try to do and hit goals, it's what can you do to be better? Ratios are not nationwide. Lack of understanding about what we do and the impact that we make, and it's a societal deficit. Yet, you said, Shannon, that it's a societal deficit. But yet nurses are the most respected professionals, according to society. What, 22 some years running? I think that society as a whole might value us perhaps more than our employer. Is that possible? What are your thoughts? The responses are overwhelming. Standard work and the real work of care. The responses keep flowing. Pressure to do more with less. Punitive measures for unsafe circumstances, which is not acceptable. Value is deeper than recognition. Thank you for that, Adrian. It's hearing and respecting our thoughts and opinions as subject matter experts. And we'll be talking about each of you as the experts. And then we have, as a society, we're having to argue that nursing is a profession. We shouldn't have to argue that. We shouldn't be in that place. Let's move on to the next question, Renata.
Okay.
How do you cope in today's environment? Do you talk it out with your peers, your mentors, and support networks? Do you step back and involve yourself in self-care and reflection and perhaps recharge? Or do you push or power through, pushing on despite the level of stress? What are your responses?
All right, right now we have 43% talk it out, 27 step back, and 31 power through with 51 responses. Megan in the chat says she tries to do all three.
And how is that working for you, Megan?
And with 68 responses, it does still appear that talk it out is number one at 39%, and step back and power through are hovering around 30 or 31% each.
Okay, and Hannah tells us that she prioritized one, but now doing another. A good balance of all. Is there such a thing as balance? I ask you that question because I wrote a book about it many, many years ago called B is for Balance. I wrote the first edition, the second edition. When it came time to write the third edition, I realized, and Sigma Theta Tau realized halfway through the process, that there is no such thing and it's not within our reach. That we need instead to seek harmony in our lives, harmony in our work, and a little piece of this and a little piece of that will make it all work. I appreciate your concept about balance. I'm a big believer, but I've come to realize that even for me, it's just not within reach. Now, Janet tells us that she feels recognized with her system and leadership, but nationally there has been a disregard for nursing as a profession. And then she gives us the link to the Federal Register. Thank you for that. It will go into the recording and into the notes that are shared. So where are we with our numbers, Renata?
So sorry, I was muted. Still at the same 41%, talk it out, and 30 and 30 for step back and power through.
Okay. For the record,
81 responses.
If I was asked, I would be the one who would power through. It's not a good answer, but I would be the one who would have powered through. I would have pushed through and made it work. So it's time again to shift from victim to expert. One of the most powerful ways is for you to reclaim your voice. How do we reclaim our voice? How do we remove ourselves? How do we move from silence to strategy? How do we enhance our communication skills so that we're not playing whispering down the lane? So we're not being a teenager with what goes in one ear not quite coming out the same from the other. How do we enhance our narrative and build our evidence and make it informed? And how do we speak up without burning out? We do that by creating environments where people can speak up early, clearly, and without fear of retaliation. That to me would be the ideal environment. So an example, instead of saying we're short-staffed today, I might encourage you to say, our current staffing ratio is creating a 20% increase in near misses. If I were leadership and I heard something like that, that would be a wake-up call to me. That would say, what's going on here? What do we need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen? And that those near misses don't become a fatality. When your voice is protected, risks surface sooner, decisions improve, and trust becomes a leadership asset. Think about a time when you wished that your voice had been heard. What might you have said differently? What might you have said differently? Feel free to add to the chat. What would you have said differently? What would that have looked like? And thank you for sharing that, Jim. How do we reclaim our voices? How do we reclaim our voices? When your voice is protected, as I said, the risks surface sooner. You have an opportunity because voice isn't just about speaking. It's about influence. It's about strategy. Because nursing is not about tasks. It's about the intellectual territory we hold. I recall many years ago when I started a career in infusion therapy, I decided that that was my niche. I managed to do it and do it really well, and I decided to be an expert in that process. But I also recall when we were working on scope and standards of practice that many people considered infusion to be task-oriented. And it was so much more than the task. Why didn't they understand that it required a complete assessment of the patient, of the other procedures that the patient was having, of the disease entities that were existent or for which the patient was being evaluated? Why didn't they understand that we as clinicians were not about the task? It was about our entire process and the territory that we held that allowed us to reclaim our value. So let's look at reclaiming our value. Again, nursing is not about tasks. It's intellectual property. It's about clinical surveillance, monitoring human systems on an ongoing basis. It's about crisis prevention, stabilizing before those systems break. And it's about the pulse, the heartbeat of healthcare, accelerating healing, influencing recovery, moving that trajectory. Your value is not in completing tasks. It's an impact that I promise you no metric, no ROI can possibly capture, because boundaries aren't selfish. Boundaries protect your capacity to manage complex cascades. So who among you has ever had to say no to protect patient safety or your capacity? How did that make you feel? When have you ever had to say no to protect something or your capacity to do better? Seeing the big picture, it is clear that we are the architects. You're nurses. You have a license. You have credentials following your name, some basic credentials, and some many, many more. Because in healthcare, let's face it, it's all about the alphabet soup. But seeing the bigger picture, it's clear that we are architects, much more than caregivers. And you've probably never really thought of yourself as an architect of change. When we embrace that role, we can shift from reactive to visionary. So let's look at reclaiming our profession. And yes, make no mistake, we are a profession. So you're an architect of change. It's clearly not about doing the job. It's about ownership of the future of healthcare. Those of us on the call today in this session represent a vast multi-generational group. Some of us may be winding down and some of us may be brand new in our careers. But regardless of where we are on that spectrum, unfortunately, at one time or another, we or those we love who are near and dear to us will need some semblance of healthcare. Have you thought about who's going to be there to provide that level of care? Who is going to be there? If nursing shortages continue and young people, next generations, don't choose to go into nursing, who will be there? So it's about ownership. While others see a patient, you, each one of you, see a complex human system in flux. Where other people might see a hospital wing, you see a living infrastructure that requires constant recalibration. So as architects, you don't just occupy the space, you design the outcomes within it. You, each and every one of you, are the visionaries who see the cracks in the foundation, much like the crack in a foundation in your home, but it's in a system. You have the clinical authority, the strategic clarity, and the courageous compassion to rebuild that system from the inside out. So think about one area you see that could be redesigned for better patient or team outcomes. Feel free to write that in the chat. What's one area that you see that could be redesigned for better patient or team outcomes? You are the architects of change. Education over discipline. Love it. What about transition to practice? Is that an issue? Is that a problem that you face each and every day? Everyone thinks that a methodology called or labeled transition to practice is going to automatically take people from a 4-year program, some of whom have had lots of clinical experience and some of whom have had little, and transition them into full-fledged professionals in a workforce on the unit who are able to take control and be in charge and manage care. Housing for people in the community, I love it. Care for self as essential to practice. Oh, a better system of nurse competency verification, I love it. Ambulatory care nurses, Lori says, co-managing patient populations to improve access and outcomes. And Lori tells us that although compassion cannot be taught, there needs to be some level of compassion to care for patients. So let's look at that, Lori. Is compassion a skill set that you bring to the table, or is it something that is innate? Is it in your being? Is it something that is tantamount to who you are and what you do and what called you to this profession in the first place? What is compassion? Can everyone be compassionate? Or is compassion something that we as nurses hold the lid on? Do we invite others into our space who share that compassion for others? Jenna thinks that we need time off after a traumatic event. We need time to debrief. I'm sure that all of you watch The Pit. It is the most watched show on television today. As a matter of fact, after they won so many awards at last year's Grammys, they increased viewership by over 200%. And it's estimated that at least half of their viewers are people who work within the healthcare space. The fact that they take time to debrief after a patient passes, and especially when those patients are what we call frequent flyers or regulars, and they take the time to hear from everyone on the team what they were feeling at that moment and allow them the time to recover from the trauma of losing someone, maybe not a relative, but someone still near and dear to you, is huge. Retirement with full benefits. Now, wouldn't that be nice? After 20 years of service like the military and law enforcement. You know, Jenna, for over 20 years, I had the privilege of working in the former Soviet Union and in Central and Eastern Europe. It was at the time when we still had a USAID, and I was contracted to help create the healthcare infrastructure for those new countries. And one of the things that I found most remarkable was when a nurse went on maternity leave, the job was held for them. If it was a female nurse, the job was held for 24 months, and that individual received full salary. It was a spouse who worked for the healthcare system or a male nurse. That salary was held for 1 year with the title, and that person could return to their place of employment. To me, it was such an awakening. It was such an aha moment that nurses were truly respected for the value that they brought to the table. And oh, how I wished that that could be something that we could implement here. And yes, you're right, Jenna, that is amazing. Let's move to the next slide and talk a little bit about design. This is the WINGS framework. What is WINGS? Maybe you feel as if you have wings. You joined the profession. You took a deep leap. You didn't know what was going to happen or where it would go or what the outcomes might be. But the wings framework is a design method that allows you to look at what is, what if, what wows, and what works. So when you say what is, that is your reality. That is your time to look at, what is this all about? What is my reality? What is my reality and why does it matter? What is it? You start with what's going on right in front of you. Because this is design. Design thinking is a mindset shift. It's about owning your role and shaping the future. So what's your reality? Then you imagine what if. So I'm going to ask you to think back to your novice days on a nursing unit, or even some of your most complex episodes, maybe now, in critical care, in emergency care, in surgery, somewhere. Think about what if, the most important question that analyzes the possibilities. And you have used this question, I promise you. It's the first step, by the way, toward innovation. Because when a product didn't quite work, maybe you jerry-rigged it. Maybe you did a few things to make it work. Maybe you had to change your focus and think about, what if I did this, or what if we did that? How could we make it work? This is the antidote to the statement, we've always done it that way. This is what allows you to unleash your curiosity and your innovation by exploring what in fact is possible. Then you notice what wows. You look at the ideas and the moments that spark energy, that are exciting. Maybe as a potential breakthrough, you write it down, you iterate it. This is that process of maybe writing it on the back of a napkin, or I've seen people mark it on sheets. And I saw in one situation many years ago when we were working on real-time anecdotal documentation of patient comments in an ICU, and the nurses didn't have time to go to the computer at the base of the bed and record their comments. They wrote on their hands. But guess what? The hand or the pillowcase on which they wrote was eventually washed, and they might have lost what would have been the next big idea. So you spot those ideas and those moments that spark the energy. You test it, you refine it, you go with what works, given the resources that are available to you. And that amounts to time, talent, and unfortunately money. But you test and you refine and you act on those solutions that are going to deliver value. And then you sustain and you share. You build momentum. You build that momentum by scaling what works and inspiring other people with your story. So before we continue, let's pause for a moment of reflection. I want to make sure that you leave here fully equipped. So let's take stock. Let's look at that next slide. It's a question mark, and you might think, well, why are we having questions smack in the middle or 2/3 through a presentation? And it's because we're almost at the finish line, but let's pause. If there's a yeah in your head and you're thinking, wow, that's really transformative, now is the time. Bring up whatever question has come to mind. Ask your question, share your challenge with your peers, and let's make sure that you leave here fully equipped and unstoppable, because that's what it's all about. So if there's a question that you have, throw it in the chat and let's make sure that we cover it. I think a couple of people are having sound problems, but our wonderful KP team is taking care of that. So that's the biggest challenge, no audio. That's something that I can't fix, unfortunately, but our team can, I'm sure.
Yeah, our team's working on it right now. And thank you so much, Sharon. One of the first questions that's coming in is on speaking up. And it says, I want to speak up, but I'm afraid of being labeled as difficult. How do I start?
That is such a brilliant question. I love that question. I fortunately have always been one who, even though it got me into trouble sometimes, was never afraid to speak up and speak out. I don't recommend getting into trouble. I don't recommend allowing yourself to be the subject of retaliation because you spoke up. But what I do recommend is being a good listener, building on what someone just said, eliminating the word but from your vocabulary and substituting the word and. So when something happens or someone makes a statement, you say, I really appreciate what you just mentioned, and I'd like to add to that. So that you're reinforcing the fact that the person who just spoke up or who just created a system, even a system that's not going to work no matter what, gets recognition for what they brought to the table, but you have something that can add, that can augment their solution, and perhaps make it a win for all. If you'd really like information on clues and tips and words and verbiage that you can use, please reach out to me at the end. You'll have my contact information, and I have all kinds of sheets and things to share that will allow you to be the kind of person who can speak up and speak out.
Love that. We're getting some comments on the chat about it as well.
Yeah, I like that. If you bring up a problem, come with a reasonable solution. You must have known my boss. I had a boss at the medical school, at Chicago Medical School, where I used to run the clinics and the practice plan. And he always said, don't ever come to me with a problem unless you also have at least two solutions, and make sure that they are both solutions that will work. So yes, come up with a solution. Hopefully, the environment in which you work is going to allow you to get credit for the solution that you brought to the table and not have a director or a boss who will steal your solution as their own. That's something that I think many of us face in leadership at one time or another, whether we're working in healthcare, in pharma, in medical devices, in life sciences, in patient care. We've all seen it. We've seen it in industry. We've seen it everywhere. We've seen it in education. It happens. It happens a lot, unfortunately. My goal is to make sure that your questions get answered.
Another question that just came in is how to deal with a large or a huge generational gap. What would be some strategies for that, knowing that there's in our workplace today all the way from boomers who are starting to exit all the way to Gen Zs and everything else in between, and the millennials, etc.
Okay, another brilliant question. Actually, there's much more than that. There are some people who have been here beyond the boomers who are still working. I remember a nurse in Washington State who was still working at age 90. At the same time, when I talk about generations, I talk about 6 generations in the workplace, and I'm more than happy to share those resources with you as well. When we talk about 6 generations, we're talking about Gen Alpha. These are the kids who are 15 and 16, who are going to be caregivers, who are deciding if they want to be a nurse, who are deciding if they want to enter a healthcare career, and deciding if they want to be part of our process. So when we think about it, we have to think big. And in dealing with multi-generations in the workplace, you need to consider, and again, I have a handout on it, what keeps them motivated, what is it that they're looking for? For example, we talked about balance before, in work-life balance. For some, for baby boomers, it's a nice add-on. But for some, like Gen Z or Gen Y, it's an expectation. It belongs as part of the agreement. They don't plan to work over whatever given number of hours. They see life in a different way. They're very connected to their technology. That phone becomes part of an appendage. It is not just an add-on. So when we look at the kinds of things that make them come to your work environment, that make them stay or want to stay, and what you can do to keep them there, to keep them engaged and to feel important, there are a wealth of solutions that frankly are an entire masterclass. But again, I'm happy to share. And as a matter of fact, I'd be happy to send Renata a handout on that to include with the recording.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's very generous of you.
Pleasure, of course. I have resources for everything. So no, I seriously do. So let's move on to the next slide, because we want to translate our insights into tangible wins that move our units forward. We want to become unstoppable. How do we become unstoppable? I talked before about small wins. Small wins fuel momentum. Advocacy secures our seat at the table. And sustainability ensures that the fire never burns out. Let's talk, since we already talked about momentum, let's talk a little bit about our seat at the table. How do we get that coveted seat at the table? I have a colleague from Mass General who often says that if there is no seat at the table, bring your own seat. And if in fact there is no table, then go out and build one. But you deserve to have that seat at the table. These things together transform nurses into unstoppable architects of change, shifting from a temporary quick fix from that Band-Aid effect to a permanent systemic movement of healthcare leadership. So I encourage you, each of you, to choose one small win to act on in the next 7 days. It might not be as big as sending a man to the moon or a woman or a teacher or anyone else, but a small win is more than a checked box. A small win is a micro movement that shifts the pulse of the unit. And here's an example of a small win. It might be something like standardizing that transition to care huddle that you have in the morning or at the end of a shift. So there's a 60-second bedside focus huddle to align the team on the patient's primary goal. It costs nothing. It's part of the job. It builds immediate connection. It reduces clinical error. And can I tell you, having been the family member in the room when the huddle was going on, it really allows the patient and family to feel engaged, to feel appreciated, to feel valued, and as if they too are part of this process. Each of these small wins is a brick in a movement that replaces the temporary fix with a systemic change. So ask yourself, which small win will you own this week? Own your expertise, because if you don't narrate your value, trust me, no one else will. No one will. You need to toot your own horn, which is very, very hard for nurses to do. When I work with people who are seeking fellowship in the Academy of Nursing, and they're working on their own statements, they have to say who they are and what they've done that sets them apart from others. But for many of us in this profession, we sit back and we think that the other person is more important. The other person has led the way. The other person has steered the ship. When in fact, it might be a small idea that you or I had that has transformed care, that has made such a huge difference. We might be the ones who need to be recognized. And so I encourage you to learn to toot your own horn. Kelly tells us that the million-dollar question is how to manage our standard work. The challenges of the constant changes in clinical practice, technology, oh my heavens, EHR updates, limited budget, shortages, decreased resources, and time for education collaboration with higher expectations for our matrices, all while doing our best to maintain our caritas, loving kindness, and excellent care experience with all interactions. Wow, that is quite the statement, Kelly, and you are 100% on target. 100% plus. We believe in heart-centered care. We know that we bring the heart and the pulse to healthcare. We know that we drive the outcomes. And we know the value that we bring to the table each and every day. If it's something as minor as holding a patient's hand during a procedure or wiping a brow, those are the small things, the small wins that make a big, big difference. But when you're confronted on a daily basis by the challenges of a system that does not value you, that does not appreciate who you are, that does not see you as an architect of change, and that sees you instead as a dumping ground, possibly, one on whom to just keep shoving whatever is the leftover task, whatever needs to be done. It's frustrating. It makes many of my peers and my colleagues at home and abroad wonder why. Why did I enter this profession? Why did I choose this profession? I was telling your colleagues from KP today that my TED Talk was released today, and it's about being unstoppable by thinking differently. And I'm going to share the link to it at the end because I'd like you to view it. I'd like you to like it, of course, and share it with others. But I think that the most profound moment is when I talk about nursing chose me. Unlike others, I didn't choose nursing. I came to nursing through a scholarship from the Philadelphia Public Schools because I had been a runaway and because I didn't see a future for myself and because I didn't have the opportunity to go to college like others did. And I knew that the only way that I was going to move on and go ahead was by practicing what I had been thinking in a different way outside of the box since I had been a child. And moving on, that is what made me unstoppable, which is the theme of that TEDx talk and that TEDx program. So I'll share it with you, and I'd love your feedback. But you need to own your expertise. If you don't narrate your value, no one else will. And thank you for that, Jim. I appreciate it. The true value of teams, never said better, that have access to leaders who have built resilience and a library of resources and the willingness to share with others to ease their path. That's what we're all about. That's why this matters. That's why your colleagues from KP have offered you this opportunity for learning. That's the purpose of our program. And that is indeed what helps us to become unstoppable. So let's look at takeaways. We've answered the question how. We've answered the question how. So let's finish with the when. This is more than a session that you've attended. This is a commitment, folks, a commitment that you're making to yourself and to our profession. When you leave today's session, head back to your unit, head back to the classroom or wherever you go, the systems might look the same, but you, I hope, are different. You have the tools of an architect and the voice of a leader. I'm challenging you to pick one thing we talked about today, one boundary to set, one value-driven story to tell leadership, or maybe one small process that you can redesign, excuse me, and do it this week. Because trust me, nursing is not just the backbone of healthcare. It's the brain, it's the heart. And it's time that we started acting like the owners of this profession. Get out there, stay strategic, stay connected, and above all, stay unstoppable. That's what it's all about. It is, in fact, a movement. Know that your voice matters, your value is real, and you are, in fact, unstoppable. So this is a movement. Let's look at that next slide. Restore the power, the purpose, and the possibility of nursing. Stop patching. Stop patching the cracks and start rebuilding the system. It's more than a Band-Aid. We are igniting a movement that is rooted in unwavering competence and connection. It's time to become unstoppable because nursing is a profession of power, not just a job of endurance. And every small success, think about it. You've all played Legos with kids, or perhaps you've done it yourself at one time or another. Every small success is a building block and part of a larger transformation. Let's look at the evidence. I have a slide for you on that. It's really a QR code. And everything we've talked about today is evidence informed, providing you with a foundation of truth to stand on when you return to work. I'm going to add that link in the chat. And finally, it's time to bring everything together and commit to action. For our last slide. Are you ready to stay unstoppable? I encourage you to reach out today, to collaborate, to ask questions, to share your nursing journey. What brought you to this space? Tell everyone in your social media and beyond what brought you to this profession. Why do you stay? Has anyone ever asked you to do a stay interview and find out what keeps you there and why you stay? Let's continue as professionals to build this movement together, because you are unstoppable and the nursing profession is unstoppable. So let's act like it today, tomorrow, and every day. And as you leave today, I encourage you to think about how you will step into your power and your influence. Please feel free to connect with me. I'm thrilled to connect with you. And again, I will share resources with my colleagues so that they can then share them with you. Let's open it up to any questions you may have, although we addressed a lot of questions along the way.
You did. Thank you so much, Sharon. We've had the opportunity to collect some questions during your discussion. And for the audience, if you have questions that come to mind, feel free to raise your hand and we can enable your mic, which you can then unmute. Or, as always, feel free to use the chat function to share your thoughts and questions. We have about 3 minutes left. And I wanted to ask a question that's come in on hidden value. The question is, leadership only seems to care about metrics. How do I make them see my real value?
Okay. A brilliant question, and one that each of us has faced one time or another. There's more to patient care than metrics. There's more than just the results of the survey. I read an article this morning on LinkedIn where someone had talked about the fact that going beyond the Press-Ganey survey, the hospital was still providing surveys of its own to determine its own metrics, to find out beyond what it said in those standardized questions, patients really felt about the organization and about the care that they received. You need to encourage patients to speak up and speak out. You need to allow them to be your advocates and to promote you. And you need to come up with ideas and wins for leadership that will allow them to recognize the fact that they could not do what they do without you. You are the metric. It is your numbers. It is you showing up each and every day and in every way that makes the difference between their outcomes and their numbers. And healthcare is so much more than a numbers game. I want you to always remember something that I learned so long ago. Healthcare is a business, just like any other business. The difference in this business and other businesses is that the product or the capacity with which we deal is human lives and human happiness, neither of which should ever, ever be compromised. If we go into everything we do with that thought in mind, we will win this game.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Sharon. And it's almost 1 o'clock here, so we're going to wrap things up. And I just want to, again, thank you, Sharon, for all your insights. And thank you for those of you today who joined us for this important, engaging, inspiring conversation. In terms of small wins, just by being here today and braving the weather to come to work if you're in Northern California or Hawaii, really appreciate you making it. And as a reminder, this session has been recorded and the edited presentation will be emailed to all registrants. Contact hour credit will be approved for those who attended the live session today for all California nurses. And we hope today's session sparked reflection and strengthened your commitment to lead, speak your truth, and focus on resilience. If you have any questions or want to discuss further, please reach out to us or visit our website for additional resources. Stay connected by joining our upcoming events, including Senator Gail Adcock's live unrecorded session, What They Don't Know Can Hurt Us, on April 9th, and Nelson Dunlap's session on the political determinants of health on April 29th. Please take a moment to share your thoughts in our brief survey to help us create a meaningful Illumination Series events for you in the future. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.